Welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular city council meeting in a Microsoft Teams way for April 7th, 2020. Sylvia, roll call.
Mayor Mays.
Here.
Council President Rosner.
Here.
Councilor Browse.
I saw her R on the screen.
Councilor Browse, can you hear me? We'll get her back in a minute. Councilor Young.
She was connected too.
Councilor Griffin.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. And Councilor Scott.
Yes, I am here.
Councilor Garland.
Here.
Thank you. So Councilor Young and Browse.
We'll get them back.
We'll get them.
All right, well, let's just continue. Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Louder, folks. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Had to prompt Joe and Sylvia to speak up. I was all alone in here. It's like, you remember the words, right? Of course. All right. Approval of the agenda.
I make a motion we approve. Second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Now, in a virtual sense, or Teams meeting sense, do we need to do roll call on every vote?
No, but I know I don't have Kim and Browse.
Right. Kim and Browse are still not back. So Joe's going to text them to see how that's going. So the agenda is approved. So we will move on to consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. And for the folks at home that might be watching on YouTube Live, or I don't even know, are we on YouTube Live?
We're on YouTube.
We're on YouTube Live.
And then also on our public access, correct, Brad? Yeah.
Public access. So this is our first Microsoft Teams city council meeting. So anyways, forgive us as we bump along for the first one of many, I suspect, doing it this way. Anyways, we have 5 items on our consent agenda. Item A is approval of the February 29th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Item B is approval of the March 17th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Item C is approval of the March 19th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Item D is a resolution 2020-022 authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract to replace the roof at the police department. Item E is resolution 2020-023 transferring budget expenditure appropriations between categories for fiscal year 2019 to 20.
So, Mr. Mayor, just before you do the vote, Councilor Young said her router rebooted for some reason.
Okay, so Councilor Young is working.
She's working to get back, and I believe Councilor Browse is back.
Renee, are you back with us?
Yeah, I'm having computer issues.
Okay, good to have you back. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
There you are. You're
Sideways.
I don't know why I'm upside down.
Don't change it. It's lovely.
It's okay.
Perfect.
So I read the consent agenda, the 5 items on it. Is there a motion?
I move consent.
Second.
That was Renee made the motion, Russell seconded it. Discussion? All in favor of approving the motion, approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that was everyone except Kim. And wait, I think Kim is now back. Kim, are you with us?
It may take a moment for her to.
Kim, when you're here, let us know.
I'm here.
Oh, great. So we're now moving on to item 6, citizen comments. We do not have anyone in the audience today to give citizen comments. We got a email today for someone who wanted to give testimony for citizen comments. It will be in the record. The short bit of it, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, our local medical marijuana retailer is asking council to legalize recreational sales in Sherwood. And if we did, she would agree to a higher tax for the next year, and then back to the regular tax rate after the first 12 months. And if you want to read the letter in detail, it'll be part of the meeting minutes. And that's the only emailed citizen comment that I received. And then Joe is shaking his head, nodding, saying yes, that is also the only one we have. So we will close citizen comments for today because still no one has walked into the audience. Next, under presentations, we have a proclamation that I will read. Proclamation, National Community Development Week, April 13th to 17th, 2020. Whereas the week of April 13th to 17th has been designated as National Community Development Week by the National Community Development Association to celebrate the Community Development Block Grant, also known as the CDBG program, and the Home Investment Partnership, also referred to as the HOME program. And whereas the CDBG program provides annual funding and flexibility to local communities to provide decent, safe, and sanitary housing, a suitable living environment, and economic opportunities to low and moderate income people. Whereas the Home Investment Partnership, the HOME program, provides funding to local communities to create decent, safe, affordable housing opportunities for low-income persons. Nationally, over 1 million units of affordable housing have been completed using HOME funds. And whereas the program's history, over the program's history, our community has received a total of $2.34 million, roughly, rounding up, in CDBG funds. Now, therefore, be resolved that the City of Sherwood designates the week of April 13th through 17th, 2020 as National Community Development Week in support of these two valuable programs that have made tremendous contributions to the viability of the housing stock, infrastructure, public services, and economic vitality of our community. Be it further resolved that this community urges Congress and the administration to recognize the outstanding work being done locally and nationally by the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Investment Partnership Program by supporting increased funding for both programs in fiscal year 2021. Now, therefore, in witness thereof, I have hereto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Sherwood to be fixed on this date, April 7th, 2020. So, awesome. For those watching live or on delay, on the roughly 2.34 million that we've received over the years, the biggest portion in our community has been our senior center. It helped build it originally. It's helped us expand it several times, remodel it many times. So it's a very important asset for the seniors in our community. Now moving on to public hearings. We have 2 public hearings this evening. Sylvia?
The Sherwood City Council will hold public hearings this evening to hear testimony on Ordinance 2020-003, adopting Chapter 8.22 of the Sherwood Municipal Code to create a business food waste program. This is the second reading on this ordinance. And Ordinance 2020-004, amending Chapter 2.38, Emergency Code of the Sherwood Municipal Code and declaring an emergency. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. We will hear a staff report, questions, if any, by the City Council for staff. We will then receive written testimony or public testimony. We will then open the public hearing for testimony, and the time will be limited to 4 minutes per person. Any interested person may present testimony. We will then close the public hearing. No other comments will be heard from the public. Final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the council, followed by discussion by the council. For the ordinance this evening, where we have a second hearing, a decision may be made by the council at the close of this hearing, or the matter may be continued to time and date certain. If the matter is continued to a date certain, this is the only notice of that date you will receive. If you wish to speak, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the city recorder. The mayor will recognize people wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed to the mayor. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record, as this hearing will be recorded.
Thank you, Sylvia. So item A, ordinance 2020-003, the business food waste program. Joe?
Mr. Mayor and Council, this is, as City Recorder Murphy said, this is the second reading of this ordinance. I'll just touch on the highlights and answer any questions Council may have. A number of businesses in Sherwood, already commercial businesses, do a voluntary program with Pride Disposal. This program would, over time, depending on volume, basically establish a mandatory program for those businesses, but over, I believe, almost a 3-year period of implementation. We've worked closely with the Washington County Commercial Food Recycling Program, who does a lot of education with businesses, and we've worked with Pride Disposal. Both support this program. The enforcement of this, if there is any enforcement, would be at the city's discretion, not at the county or metro, just for clarification. And we would work to educate folks before they would be impacted by the different phases in the program. Many jurisdictions around our region are adopting similar programs, so getting food waste out of the waste stream is very important, and especially with large producers of food waste. I think the other thing in this ordinance that we mentioned a few weeks ago is that we have a lot of flexibility. I or my designee have a lot of flexibility to work with businesses if for some reason there are obstacles, and to work with Pride to try to get the program to work. So that's a very quick snapshot. I'm here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Before we go to questions or comments from council, it is a public hearing. It is open for folks to give testimony. We do not have anyone in the audience. There was no written testimony submitted that I'm aware of. Joe's shaking his hand as well. So I'm closing the public hearing portion of Ordinance 2020-003. Questions or comments from council for Joe or about the ordinance? Or a motion? Go, Renee. Go, Renee.
I gotta find the ordinance. I don't have it in front of me.
All right.
The attachment adopting 2020-003, adopting Chapter 8.22 of the Sherwood Municipal Code to create a business food waste program.
I second.
Thank you, Kim, and Doug seconded it. Sylvia will take roll on the vote.
Ordinance 2020-003, adopting Chapter 8.22 of the Sherwood Municipal Code to create a business food waste program. Counselor Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Counselor Griffin?
Aye.
Counselor Browse?
Aye.
Counselor Young?
Aye.
Counselor Garland?
Aye.
Council President Rosner?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, council. Thank you, Joe. The second public hearing on the agenda is Ordinance 2020-004, amending Chapter 2.38, Emergency Code of the Sherwood Municipal Code and declaring an emergency. Joe?
So I will let Josh chime in where necessary, because he largely wrote this. And Josh is on the phone. So in light of the current COVID-19 emergency, the mayor and council and certainly the community has seen that within our current code, the city manager is allowed to declare an emergency for an initial 2-week period, and then has to extend that in basically 1-week increments for the duration of the emergency. Probably code that was written not thinking about an extended pandemic like we are currently going through. So we are proposing a little bit longer periods of time, essentially, so I don't have to basically extend it every week. In this case, I think what we've proposed is 30 days. Is that correct, Josh?
That's correct.
Just to give some additional flexibility so we don't have to continue to extend the emergency declarations. So we did also change one other section. We didn't want to tinker too much with this section of the code, but under the definitions, there's a chain of command. Basically, if the city manager cannot do his or her job, then the assistant city manager was next in line, and then the public safety director. We are proposing, since neither of those positions are currently in our organization, to eliminate those. And if you were to do that, the chief of police would be the next in line in terms of succession.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Again, we did not receive any email comments on this proposed ordinance. We have no one in the audience, so I will close the public hearing for the proposed ordinance. There's no point of doing an emergency because I'm not voting for this. But questions or comments from council?
This is Doug. I don't see the need necessarily to eliminate those two positions from the list. If they are currently not filled positions or non-existent positions, then the list would just skip to the next one anyway. But at some point in the future, if they did exist or were filled, they seem to be in the right logical order to me, so I don't really see a need to make that change.
Good comment. Thank you, Doug. Other comments or questions?
I have a question. So can is it just a default 30 days, or can Joe decide to do it for 2 weeks less than 30 days, or is it an increments of 30 days?
I believe it says up to.
Yeah, I think there's
in both portions, the initial and the subsequent.
Is that correct, Josh, the way you drafted it?
Sorry, I dropped out of the call for a minute there. What was the question?
I would have discretion.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
The city manager would have discretion. It's not an automatic 30 days. It's up to 30 days. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And it looks like by proclamation, it can be terminated at any time.
Correct.
Okay.
What problem are we solving with that change?
I would say the only, and I wouldn't use the word problem, quite honestly. I think just in light of what we're going through at this point, just the flexibility to extend the original declaration a little longer originally. We got the idea essentially from a few other jurisdictions that had very similar language that are proposing these changes. So I don't think it's a problem. If you were to keep it the way it is, we would just extend the declaration every week. So,
is that particularly onerous to do an extension week by week?
No. I think it's somewhat confusing to the public when you see other jurisdictions extending the declaration longer.
That would be my only concern. I mean, I think in this particular case, everyone knows we're under a shutdown statewide, but going week to week, you might give the false impression that it's over in a week. So being able to set a longer time frame makes a little sense from that perspective. But no offense, Joe, from the paperwork standpoint, it doesn't make sense to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo what Joe said. It's mostly about a confusion for the public, and also a lot of things are tied to the duration of the emergency. So, for example, the moratorium on evictions is tied to the city's local emergency declaration. So when you have that extending from week to week, that just creates a lot of uncertainty for people in the community as far as what the term of that moratorium is.
I really think we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. That's why I'm not voting for it.
Have we had any complaints, or have we had people calling concerned that the moratorium was going to end or anything like that?
No. And again, I think I echo what Councilor Scott asked. Is this really a problem? And I don't think it's a problem. It's just old language that was adopted 11 years ago and really didn't allow the flexibility that we were looking for. And we saw other jurisdictions doing similar things, stuck with the same language, so we are proposing it. If you don't feel this is necessary, it's not going to create any additional problems that we foresee. We were just looking for some additional flexibility.
Other thoughts or feedback? I mean, nothing's going to happen tonight.
Yeah, I mean, my only thought is 30 days. 30 days is a long time, and while in this case that flexibility is needed, and this is a kind of an extreme thing, and no offense to anyone else, but 30 days is something that could be potentially abused in a situation down the road, and I'm not saying anyone here would do that. So, is there thought given to a shorter timeline, maybe a 14 days instead of 7, so it's kind of more of a middle ground solution or something? I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
So I would offer
Same thing. I thought maybe 2 weeks was a better deal. But it's not broken.
That's kind of where I'm at. If we're not getting complaints, we're not hearing that people are confused, and it's not broken, why fix it? Yeah.
So you can't do this as an emergency anyways, right? Because the mayor's already said he's not going to vote for it, so we'd have to have a second reading.
That's correct.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep, so I guess the question is whether council wants us to bring this back for a second reading, and if so, if there are any changes that council would like to see before then.
I just say leave it as is or 2 weeks.
I think we have better stuff to spend our time on right now.
I agree with Councilor Scott on that.
So just keep it for now.
Sean, what do you think? Renee, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have any trouble with the language, the 30-day language. I think I don't mind giving the city manager some flexibility. I don't think this is the last event that we're going to face. Maybe not of this nature, but we've certainly got a Cascadia event to plan for. And, I don't think 30 days is excessive. It says up to 30 days, so I don't have any problem with the language, but I'm not going to start fighting too hard on this one if the remainder council doesn't see it as important.
Or maybe we pick it up after we're done with this, just to keep staff focused on, the emergency at hand for now.
Just for the record, I'm on the same page as Sean on this one.
Thank you, Renee.
Hey, Mayor.
Yeah, Chief?
Just so everybody knows, Jeff Groth, Police Chief. Just one thing to consider, and Craig is with us, and he can chime in too, as from the incident commander EOC perspective, having to renew the emergency declaration frees a lot of the resources and a lot of the decisions we're able to make in an EOC. So I just want to throw out for consideration, having to constantly renew that creates a bit of a functionality problem for us, in that we have to make sure that we do that every week. It's not going to shut us down, but it just creates a bit of a functionality problem, having to keep renewing the declaration. So,
I guess, sorry, this goes back to me to the original question we asked Joe, is what's the overhead involved in in renewing this every week, and we were told there basically wasn't any. And now it feels like you're saying there is. So I would be more inclined to want to extend it if there's some overhead involved that's causing us problems.
I think it's.
I feel like I'm hearing.
In looking at Joe, I believe
on
the extent of the process is changing the date on a file, printing it, and signing it.
Yeah, it's actually usually in this case, in this current situation, Josh would craft it so it has good legal wording, and then he ships it to me, and then I sign it. So it's not a lot of work, but there is a little bit of time that has to happen. So the idea of getting through this emergency and kind of revisiting this, in addition to maybe some other sections of the emergency code, we could certainly do that. This is not urgent. We just felt, because we saw some others having this problems, like, let's try to fix this now to address this. And if you decide not to do this, it is certainly not the end of the world.
I understand the issue not being difficult. I guess I'm trying to understand what Chief's saying it causes some issues with.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, and again, just food for thought. The EOC, depending on what the situation and the incident we're working through, there could be a lot of moving pieces and parts, and just the fewer things you can shave off the list that you have to remember and you have to make sure that we have identified and taken care of. Councilor Scott, in terms of overhead, no, it's not like it's a several-hour process, certainly, but it's something that has to be considered every week in a long-term rolling incident. If we have a 3-day weather event that peaks really quickly as an emergency and then it ends, we move into recovery, that's something wholly different than a pandemic where we're a month and a half into this thing and we don't know what the next week is going to look like, and it's just one more thing that has to be remembered and considered. So it's just flexibility.
And what happens, Joe, or Josh, what happens if a week goes by and like we're in some crazy situation like Sean was saying that we can prepare for, and it gets forgotten to be extended?
So there's a number of potential consequences. So during the period that the emergency was not declared, because we could redeclare an emergency after that. During that lapse, potentially, we're not able to recover costs that the city incurred. We would potentially have, a lapse in, for example, anything that's tied to the emergency declaration, like the moratoria on the evictions. That could create a complication there. Somebody was evicted during that time period. Public contracting laws, we don't have the same flexibility during that lapse. So if we inadvertently signed a contract thinking the emergency was in effect when it wasn't, potentially we have to, rescind that contract. There are a number of complications if we had a lapse.
I have zero worries. I think we're wasting too much time on it.
So I would suggest that we revisit this after this situation.
I like that idea too, given that after we get through this and we kind of debrief and go through the process of looking at how everything worked, there might be other changes we want to make as well. But you do it all at once.
I think that's fine. If anyone wants to know my opinion, I think that's a fine result of this conversation.
All
right. So we will not bring this back next week. Or should we continue the second hearing to September?
We can do that, or basically the city's
have a little work session and
we could
chew on it then.
We could do that, or we just withdraw at this point. And
why don't we withdraw, and then we can have a work session post this will still be going on at some level in September, I'm quite confident. Not necessarily an emergency level, but we'll be in a new normal, or in a new ever-adjusting normal.
Correct.
And maybe we have time to dig into it to see if we want to do something. All right.
So, Mayor, Mayor, excuse me, I have just one question. Josh, just for the record, would withdrawing the ordinance remove it from the record, or do we need to table it? Can you tell us what the appropriate language is?
So this is the first hearing, so there's no vote required. It was a recommendation for a vote, but no vote is required, so no action has to be taken on this evening. And then the city manager sets the agenda.
We lost you there mid comment.
Right as you were saying, city manager sets the agenda.
You hit the hang up button. You're literally not on the screen anymore.
So I think, I could be wrong, I think I could bring it back at some later point under the same number, so you have a record, and it could look very different at that time and place. And that way you retain the record for a later decision.
We got the direction that we need.
Is he back?
I'm back. How much of that did you miss?
Is that
Second.
So you made the comment that this is the first reading, no vote is required. Then you said the city manager, and
That's
you
the
hung up.
agenda.
Yeah, city manager has the discretion to put together the future agendas. So I don't think any action from city council is necessary. He's received direction to just not put this on a future agenda and do a work session instead in the future.
Yep.
Great. All right.
So in the meantime, Joe, every week you're having to declare an emergency.
Yep, but it's routine. It's 5 minutes, as the
Okay.
mayor said. It's not a big deal.
Change the date, print it, sign it. Next. All right. City manager report.
So mayor and council, obviously lots of things going on. I think essentially I will take any questions from council on items. The city continues to operate. My team at City Hall continues to amaze me in terms of the work they do. This organization, as I've said before, has flipped upside down like many businesses and organizations, and the flexibility and the brainstorming and problem solving that my team throughout the organization is doing is quite impressive. Services are continuing. They just are being done in different ways than they were before we started this whole process. So I know the council may have specific questions on things that I can respond to, but things are going, we're getting kind of in a routine now after a couple weeks of what we've been experiencing, and I think we will all be happy when this is done, but as Mayor Mays alluded, I think we're in a marathon here that will evolve and change over time, but it's not going to be over anytime soon, in our opinion. So I'll leave it at that, unless there's questions.
So what happened yesterday?
What happened yesterday?
You notified business.
Oh, yes. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we started to notify the various businesses that were approved for the emergency grant program that we launched about 7 or 8 days ago. Friday afternoon, evening, we sent notification to 94 businesses in town that are receiving a small grant to help them weather the economic storm that everyone is going through. Those businesses were notified Friday evening. We started, they had to provide some information to the city before we could issue a check. The businesses were largely right on top of that. I think some of the emails came with the information almost, within 5 minutes of me notifying them that they were approved for their grants. So we started issuing checks yesterday and mailing them. I think $119,000 worth of grant funds were mailed out yesterday. Another $20,000 were mailed today. As soon as businesses get the information that's required, which is fairly minimal, it's a W-9 form, a federal form, we're cutting checks every day and mailing them. I know the businesses that have received money from the city have been very thankful, and especially the quickness of getting the funds to them so they could use it to pay rent or pay their employees or pay some other bills. They all know that it's not going to solve every business's problem, and we've referred them to Bruce Coleman and others for other sources of funding, SBA, federal dollars, state dollars, to help them through this crisis. But we're pretty pleased at how the program went and how quickly we were able to respond.
Yeah. Kudos to council for supporting Joe and the program. Joe, great job working with Bruce, the chamber, to get the outreach, get the application, process them, review them, make a decision. Like I said, record speed to get it out there in people's hands. Nobody that I know of in Oregon comes close to the level of support or the speed per capita for sure. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah, and Joe, and if I would just like to just throw a big compliment out to Bruce Coleman as well. Through this whole thing, he's been awesome. He spoke to the Rotary Club and went over all the different programs that are available for small businesses. And Joe, if I'm not mistaken, they're gonna try and set something up for the chamber, for the businesses in general.
Tomorrow.
Bruce to present.
Tomorrow morning.
Excellent. Yeah, and just to echo what Keith said, I'm really happy with what we've done here. He's right. No other community has matched us in terms of per capita dollars that we're giving back to our community. In fact, I spent 45 minutes on the phone with Courtney Neron because she's working with the Wilsonville Council to do something similar, and they wanted to know all about our program here. So,
and Newburgh,
people are doing.
Newburgh is launching theirs. It is like a carbon copy.
Yes.
Which is a great compliment to Joe and his team.
Yeah.
And on the residential side, I saw on my utility bill that I paid this morning, right there at the top, is a notice to the community of a residential utility grant, one-time grant program for those that are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's great.
That's more need-based.
Yep.
And last time I checked, I think yesterday when I checked in with Public Works, nearly 80 folks have applied for that. And that's a one-time credit on their utility bill, which helps. Every little bit helps. If you're unemployed or negatively affected economically from this, any little thing that the city can do and others, I think, is greatly appreciated. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Other questions for Joe before we do council announcements, or anything
Just
Joe
one,
thought about?
quick,
Go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
Just one quick one. Yeah, Joe, could you talk a little bit about what Bruce is doing in terms of creating mentors that can help small businesses navigate the small business loan program?
yeah, he's gone through some training. I think it's SBA training, which is the U.S. Small Business Association or Administration, and he has also, that's been some great local business leaders that have volunteered to go through that training to be a mentor. If you're a business and you've never dealt with the bureaucracy of especially the federal government, it can be a little overwhelming, and things are moving very, very quickly and changing almost daily. So Bruce has done a lot of the training himself and spearheaded some training to be a mentor to basically help folks maneuver through that whole process, which is amazing. He, as many of you know, is kind of the Energizer Bunny. There's been a lot of long hours at City Hall over the last few weeks, and Bruce has pretty much been here the whole time trying to figure out how to help businesses. And he's trying to get other citizens in town trained to help businesses. So like tomorrow's session, which the mayor said it's open to the chamber. It's kind of co-sponsored by the chamber, but it's also open to non-chamber members as well. So he's trying as hard as possible to learn how to maneuver through all the different regulations and programs, and is there to try to help folks figure that out. And I am continuing to be very impressed with our new economic development manager and his energy and commitment to helping businesses. He's done a great job.
Hey, Joe, if I can add to that, 100% agree. I applaud council for creating that or funding that position, because I can't even imagine, I was talking to him today, I can't even imagine where we would be in this crisis without having him here. So I'm super thankful. I believe he has recruited at least 2 other people to go through those trainings. And I know he copied me on an email of one that is providing some support to business owners, and they're very grateful. So I think, and he's looking for like bankers, CPAs, that kind of stuff, to go through that SBA training and then be a resource for businesses that are trying to do the loans.
And for business owners, employees, contractors, there's stories out there about running out of the funds already, but still do it. Still do it. Still apply, even if, their allotment is done, because there is lots of chatter about another round to infuse more money into that bucket for small businesses. So even if your bank is depleted, still apply is what I'm hearing. I was in a conference call, and Bruce was on it as well this afternoon with Congresswoman Bonamici and a deputy director of the SBA, and that's what they reiterated.
Yes.
And went into further detail about people that get a 1099 because they're not an employee, they're quasi-contractor, self-employed. There's relief for you. If you are an owner of a business where you don't get a quote-unquote a check because of the structure of your business or how you normally do it, there's still means of getting you paid. So keep pursuing those dollars. Keep asking questions, and get your help. Get the help. So hopefully you can continue to employ your folks and weather this pandemic.
And Bruce largely spearheaded. We have a page for businesses on all these various programs, and he's keeping that as up to date as possible, kind of to be a clearinghouse for information.
Yeah.
And when in doubt, just contact Bruce, and he can help you maneuver through that process. So.
Awesome. Other questions for Joe or his team? All right. Council announcements. Who'd like to make an announcement?
I have 2 things.
All right.
I want to echo what Erica said. The Sherwood Comprehensive Plan update. We're in the Phase 3 Strategic and Collaborative Government Block 3 of 6. There's a survey that went out. The citizens can access that survey at sherwood2040.org, and they can fill out that survey through April 13th, unless any of that has changed. If that's correct, Erica. If that's not correct, Erica, let us know. Also, the Sherwood and Robin Hood Festival Association's meeting, no surprise, for April is canceled. They're hopefully still planning for the event in July, hopefully. And if you want more information, go to their website, sherwoodrobinhoodfestival.org. That's it.
Thanks, Russell. Other announcements?
I'll chime in and just thank city staff for all the work they've been doing the last few weeks through this crisis and setting up these virtual meetings for us. I know it's nice to still be able to do our council meetings, but I know staff has been working really hard behind the scenes, and much of staff, probably most of staff, working from home, which it can always be a challenge. And I just thank all of our citizens who are following the stay-at-home order and hopefully doing the best you can with that and being considerate of your neighbors and our healthcare workers by staying home and not helping spread the virus and flattening our curve, it seems like. Seems like it's working in Oregon. So, yeah, we're all working with our kids at home. Got college kids at home here doing their work. So things just, it's a little quieter. So I just appreciate everybody and for everything they're doing.
Thank you, Kim.
I'd like to just jump in. I'd echo that, and also thank our school district and our teachers who are in uncharted territory, trying to figure out how to do lesson plans for children remotely, for their students. This is unexpected and very difficult, all up and down the grade levels. And I know I've got 2 kids at home right now that are adjusting to new way of learning. And so I know our teachers are doing everything they can to keep those kids' minds active and growing. So thank you all to the teachers and the school administrators for doing what you're doing.
You're here. Thanks, Sean. Last chance, anyone?
Just echo my thanks to everybody as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee.
And just, this is Tim, just real quick. Again, also just a big, huge thanks to the city staff and Joe and his team and all the great work that they've done through this process. And I'll hear about a great idea and I'll call Joe up and I say, what about this, Joe? And he goes, oh, we're already doing it, which is awesome. And to that end, Chief, could you talk a little bit about the prescription delivery program that you're setting up?
Setting up? It started Monday.
Or did he already set up?
Yes, it's already set up and it's already been active, and we've gotten a few calls. Probably not anticipating a huge response, but it only takes a few to make an impact. So, yeah, it's up and running. And actually, interestingly enough, the first call that somebody made, they made through dispatch because they weren't aware of the program. But we ended up helping them out anyway. So, yep, we're good.
Thanks, Chief. And just a big thanks to our police officers and you that are out there in the community doing their job amongst all of this and the pandemic. And for those that are maybe watching, all the healthcare workers out there that are in the trenches in our hospitals dealing with this issue, I really appreciate everything that you do. I do have one quick thing. I did actually attend a meeting that was not COVID related. We had our first meeting of the Broadband and Telecommunications Committee with the LOC to talk about lobbying for the long session that's coming up next year. So it was a nice break from all the COVID news that we've been having to deal with recently. But it was just our first meeting. We just started the brainstorming process. Joe, and I have some interesting stuff for you around that I'll get to you around RF emissions and stuff like that with small cells. But other than that, don't have anything else.
Thanks, Tim. Doug, do you have anything to add?
No, I think everybody said everything that needs to be said. I will just say I agree with all of it.
Awesome. And let you know, I think this is the first time I've seen a chief in a T-shirt. He's working. This home office thing is working well. Chief, look at it's cool. I concur with what everyone has said. Our community rocks. Our city staff are doing a wonderful job.
He's showing his Cabela shirt. He's like,
yeah.
And meanwhile, Doug is blending in with his background.
Body.
In a weird way, it's kind of next week is going to be the first week where we're only going to go to once a week COVID countywide meetings with mayors and county chair. So I'm looking forward to that, but it's crazy to think that we're settling into this normal that we're just doing it once a week. The community may or may not have learned the positive news over this past weekend. Our hospitals in our county, we're seeing an actual lower visitation and intake rate, not dramatic, but definitely a little bit lower over the weekend, which was nice to see. And it'll be really nice to see what happens the rest of this week with folks that report to ERs and get admitted to hospitals, since that is what I certainly track more than anything else. because we know there's lots of people out there that have it, that are asymptomatic or having minor symptoms and recover, but at least some good news. And kudos to our governor and the governors of Washington and California for sending extra medical equipment to other states that have much bigger problems.
Mr.
And we're
Mayor,
going to have our first virtual, back to normal-ish, whatever this normal is, Washington County Coordinating Committee. We're going to have our first meeting since this all started, and it'll be like this, a virtual Teams meeting, which, if it's anything like what has been 3 days a week meetings with some of these same characters, namely the mayors of Washington County, it's going to be crazy because we can't pause long enough to let each other finish a sentence. So that'll be fun. But anyways, Joe, you were going to say?
So I was going to maybe remind you, you had shared some information, I think, from California about speeding. And I shared back with some what's going on in our region, and maybe you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah. So Joe and I chat. We try to touch base for at least 5 minutes every day at the end of the day. And we were on the topic a week or so ago, a couple times past week, about budgets, how this is all has the potential of impacting the city's budget in comparison to other cities in Oregon that we know of, other states, cities in other states. And the two biggest kind of buckets, really there's three that we can see some impacts to us, namely shared revenue with gas tax revenue for road maintenance. We know that's going to be down for this stretch. We talked about potentially the impacts to traffic violations, and then maybe on the development side, we'll see. But Joe made the comment that because we brought it up, and he goes, well, I just got a report or a summary that the traffic camera citations actually increased last month when we all would have expected after a month of this pandemic it to be down. So
there was no traffic to slow them down.
Right. And so lo and behold, there was an article on page one of the Metro section or whatever on LA about how speeding is becoming a big problem because there's no traffic and everyone is out there enjoying no traffic. And then there was an article that I just read the headline of, in our area, in the Portland metro area, the same thing is happening. People are seeing no traffic and they think they can pick their speed. So interesting.
Yeah, and we reposted, I think it was a KPTV story about speeding, excessive speeding in the region. And a Washington County deputy sheriff said that they're pulling over people going 80, 85, and sometimes 100 miles. And 100 miles, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, I think 100 miles, they said anyone going over 100 miles an hour in Oregon faces over $1,000 fine and possible loss of their license. But a number of folks are saying, oh, I thought that there was no enforcement because of the pandemic. And that I'm surprised you're out here enforcing the speed limits. And that's not true. You still need to drive safely. And as the story said, you're risking your own life, but you're also risking, at that high speed, you're risking others on the road.
Yeah.
So slow down is basically the message.
Yeah, for sure. Watch the laws, obey the laws, be safe. We want everyone to be safe. I was on 217, which in this afternoon coming home from work because I was doing an errand, I avoid 217 like the plague. There was almost no traffic. I was going 60 to 62 in a 55. Look at that fancy Nike t-shirt, Cabela's versus Nike comparison online. Kids. And I was in the slow lane. All of a sudden something was coming up fast in the passing lane, and it was a state trooper. then there was some moron right behind the state trooper, because the trooper was going easily 70, and the trooper did not bat an eye and just let the speeders follow the trooper down the road, which surprised me. I don't believe all police officers would be so generous as that state trooper this afternoon.
It's like the pace car at the Indy 500.
Yeah. Oh, police officers going that fast. I obviously should be able to go that fast, right? That's a brilliant logic. Not. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the Sherwood community. This is going to be kind of our new normal for the foreseeable future. This is the first time in a month I've been in the same room with Joe and Sylvia. It's strange, but this is the way it is. We will adjourn in a second, and we're going to be going to an exec session, council, so we're all going to exit out of Teams and connect to the exec session Teams meeting. And if you don't have to join us for that one, staffers, enjoy your evening. With that, we're adjourned.